This one is extra special, as I always say, because they're always extra special. But this is a continuation of sort of Altissimo week. It started a week ago on the last live weekly warm-up, where I sort of talked about some Altissimo stuff, and we did that fun exercise where we sort of just experimented with those high notes, went sort of up stepwise in a scale, just to explore and get comfortable with those notes, because it is easy to not be super comfortable with those notes because they are really high notes that we don't play all that often. So we don't have as much practice up on those high notes as we do on a lot of the other notes that we're more comfortable playing. And then I did a video this last Saturday that was a sort of continuation of our Altissimo week that was all about how the Altissimo works, what these different registers are. If you missed that video, be sure to check out the link in this description of this video. There's a link to that video that I did this last week that has all of the fun Altissimo information. I go through, I sort of define all the registers, talk about the challenges getting up into the Altissimo, and all of that good stuff in that video. And now I want to sort of give you an exercise that you can use and implement into your warm-up routine to really work on those high notes. And this exercise also comes from the Next Generation Clarinet Method book. It is in the long tone section of the book, so this is going to be a long tone exercise. And it's one of the exercises in the book that is very advanced. All of this Altissimo stuff in general is sort of more advanced in general. So if you're not sounding great on like your clarion notes, then don't worry too much about these extra high notes just yet. Get those sounding really good, and then the Altissimo will be easy. But this exercise is called Ascending Through the Partials, and it gets up into the highest super Altissimo notes. And again, if you don't know what I mean by super Altissimo, then be sure to look in the description of this video to find a link to that. But what we're doing is we're basically playing through each of the partials of the clarinet. So we're going to start on B flat. And again, if you have the Next Generation Clarinet Method book, which you can get at quickstartclarinet.com/nextgenbook if you don't have it. But if you do have it, then you'll see all of the notes there. I very specifically picked these notes because they're notes that work really well, where basically all the way from the shallow all the way through the super altissimo is basically the same fingering. So what it starts on is B flat. And then just like a normal over the break long tone, which we've done before in live weekly warmups, you just add the register key with your thumb here to get from B flat slurred up to F. And then from there, you put this little altissimo intonation helper key, the E flat, A flat key down with your pinky, lift up your first finger to get that new register of the altissimo D. This is sort of the first or one of the first altissimo notes that most people learn. And you can see how it's basically the same as that low B flat. We've just added the register key, picked up this for the register, and then this just helps the pitch a little bit. So it's basically the same. We're just playing a higher squeak of B flat at this point. And then the last one is the G sharp. There's lots of different fingerings for these altissimo notes. I talk about that in the other video from this last Saturday. But the one that I like for G sharp is just removing these two fingers, and then that gets you up to the G sharp. Another one that's pretty popular is just switching your pinky keys, and that'll help you sort of squeak. And you can see how that's almost exactly the same fingering as D. You're just changing your voicing a little bit, aiming for a little bit different partial. It's very similar to how brass players, like if you're thinking of somebody playing the trumpet, they only have those 3 valve combinations, but they can play a lot of different notes because they're aiming at those different partials. Clarinet and woodwind instruments have those partials as well. We just never think about them because we have many more keys before we change partials. And we also have like octave keys or register keys to help us change the partials. So we don't think about it as much, but it's 100% the same, where we have to change the way that we're aiming and aim for that new partial and make sure that we're aiming for the correct partial so that we don't get anything interesting. And that's what happens when you squeak, is that you're getting a different partial than what you were aiming for. So that's the first one, B, F, D, G sharp. The next one is C, G with the register key to get to G, E, and then A, and typically I use the same fingering for E and A. It's 100% just the voicing change, the partial change. Then we have C sharp, G sharp, F, and then for the high B flat, again, it's basically the same fingering, but I actually use a backless fingering. So I take my thumb off of the thumb hole, but leave it on the register key to go from F up to B flat. Then the last one is E, register key to B, up to G. Again, basically the same fingering. I just add this one and change the voicing. And then C, again, basically the same fingering. I just add one finger down to get to that highest partial. And this C is the like super high C. That's technically the highest note on the instrument. There's lots of people who play higher than that, but it's the highest official note on the clarinet. So now I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this like normal. I hope you don't mind the squeaking because I'm going to do all of the squeaks all the way up there so you can sort of hear how it goes. And I want you to listen for how it's still a true long tone. And every time I get to that new note, I'm trying as best I can to make a smooth transition to the next note and also sort of dialing in the sound, getting used to how it feels to play those notes and get them sounding really good. So here we go. I'll try to sit up so you can see my fingers a little bit. So that was just maybe a little bit too quick of a run through of it, but you could hear how there were some times where I had a transition that I didn't like, so I just went back and did it again. You could hear on the G up to E, I actually squeaked on that one and was aiming a little bit too high and started to get that A out rather than the E that I was aiming for to start with. So there's all kinds of issues that can come up. And I think I would suggest for you practicing this to hold each of those notes even a little bit longer. I know it can be uncomfortable to hold those altissimo notes nice and long, but if you think about it, we hold the low notes really long when we're trying to learn them. And that's what allows us to play them really well and get a great sound on them. So if you want to have a great sound on your altissimo notes, then you should apologize to your neighbors and then do that as well and hold those notes long to feel where they are. I want to include one more little extra bonus exercise in this that's kind of fun and is another really good way to practice these voicing things. And I think since it is Altissimo week, I want to add a little extra fun for all of you. So the last version of this is an extra challenge where we're going to do it without the register key and without changing fingerings at all. So as the title of this suggests, ascending through the partials, all we're doing is going from the fundamental, the next partial, and the next partial through the range of the instrument. So theoretically, we can do that without actually changing our fingerings. So what I'm going to do is just demonstrate on the C. That one's usually the easiest, or the one that I've had the most practice on, at least the one that I'm most familiar with. So I'm going to just finger a low C the whole time, but with my voicing and with how I'm aiming at these partials, I'm going to do C, G, E, A, and go up through the partials. So you could hear especially on the G where sometimes it would want to go down to that lower partial because I wasn't quite aiming precisely where I needed to be to get that G out clearly. And that's why this exercise is fantastic to do it without the register key as well, because it really forces you to be very precise because you have no help with the fingerings of the clarinet. I would only recommend that if you're really comfortable with the normal way, doing the normal fingerings. But once you get super confident with the normal fingerings and know where each of those notes are, you can sort of test yourself a little further. Do it without changing your fingerings and see if you can still aim at all of those partials. And that's what will allow you to know where all of those notes are, know where the altissimo is. So rather than it being a high extreme squeak where you're reaching as high as you can to try to get those highest squeaks out, you're actually knowing that that's a partial you're aiming for, and you're able to execute it consistently and sound like a pro. So definitely, if you have more altissimo questions, I think this is the last altissimo thing I'm going to do for now, at least. But if you have more questions or you want to know more about a certain aspect of any of this altissimo stuff, as always, leave a comment down below and I will be happy to answer that. And I wish you the best of luck if you feel like you're ready for this. Again, like I said in the beginning, it's totally okay if you want to sort of just get your clarion note sounding really good first before you worry about tackling this altissimo. And that's why I've been doing this channel for almost 2 years now and haven't really talked about the altissimo at all, because it is more advanced and I don't want you to feel rushed into doing it. But I did want to give some tips if you are struggling with your altissimo. So I hope this has been helpful. I look forward to seeing you next week on the next live weekly warm-up, where we'll be doing something a little less squeaky. Thanks for watching. See you next week.